everyone. I'm really excited to talk to you guys about my focus for this literature review, which is the 2025 Edmonton book ban. And I'm examining the controversy between censorship and freedom. So, to dive into why this issue even matters, well, it affects how students access information first and foremost, okay? And not only that, but it also affects how teachers do their jobs, how society balances protection with freedom, and really how people look at the issue of censorship. So the ban has sparked debates across media, politics, and schools, obviously, which makes it a perfect example to study rhetoric and public perception. So let's look at how this issue began. So as you can see on this slide, I have a little timeline. So it started when parental advocacy groups raised concerns about books covering sex, gender, race, and social justice. Very conflicting topics, okay? So Alberta's educational minister issued Ministerial Order 030/2025, which banned explicit sexual content in K to 12 libraries. By October 1st, over 200 books were removed, and this led to extreme public backlash, criticism from educators, and a temporary pause by Premier Daniel Smith to review the policy, which is still ongoing because the teacher strike delayed this review. So understanding all this origin of the ban really helps us to see why the public responded so strongly. And I'm going to start off with those who supported the ban. So as you can see on this slide, there's a picture of a pie, and protecting children is pulled apart because that's the most intense viewpoint, and that's the most intense argument that these supportive viewpoints used. They said that it was a measure to protect children because they argued that the government is better positioned than individual teachers to actually set those consistent standards for what is considered age-appropriate content. Their reasoning relied heavily on ethos, emphasizing that authoritative perspective, policy expertise, and are responsible to maintain safe learning environments for children. So for them, the ban was not just about parental rights. It was about safety and educational consistency. So while supporters focused on protection and consistency, others saw the policy extremely differently. And that's where opposing viewpoints come in. So these opposing viewpoints actually saw the ban as a threat to intellectual freedom and democratic principles. So, as noted in my paper, the Canadian Civil Liberties Association said that it was a hallmark of censorship democracy. Intense wording for that. Critics argued that it limits critical thinking and could harm students' social and personal development. Their approach relied on emotional appeals and ethical reasoning to challenge the policy's legitimacy, which works with audiences most of the times. And between these two viewpoints, a more moderate viewpoint emerged because there needed to be something to balance out the two extremes. So these moderate viewpoints really focused on that administrative aspect, not so much the ideology of whether it's good or bad. And writers in this group emphasized more so confusion about the policy's implementation because they noted Premier Daniel Smith's comments that misunderstandings had intensified public reactions, and it wasn't so much the book ban as much as it was miscommunication. So instead of portraying the ban as inherently good or bad, like I mentioned, this viewpoint actually suggested that the real issue was that miscommunication and not malicious or democratic overreach. And this group really connects those extremes by acknowledging that the goal of protecting children is there, but it's aided by serious procedural flaws. So, to understand how these perspectives spread, it's important to look closely at the sources and language used to discuss them. And this is the most interesting part to me because I used a bunch of sources such as news outlets, civil liberties organizations, political commentary, educator surveys, and also just public opinions. And across these sources, the language used to describe the ban was really interesting and had a powerful influence on how readers really interpreted their own opinion of the issue. For example, words like age appropriate are very they're a logical fallacy because they aren't explanatory enough, and they just signal that caution and protection, while terms like harmful intrusion came from groups defending civil liberties. And these phrases reveal that the underlying values being emphasized by both sides are either one or the other. You can't be both, right? And that's kind of where these rhetorical patterns came in that I saw. Like I mentioned, the logical fallacies, because supportive narratives relied on authority and logic, while opposing narratives used those emotional storytelling. And they did this by highlighting students, teachers, and marginalized communities, so they would really stand out to those demographics. And visuals also played a major role in this in multimedia, because images of banned books lined up on tables, even in authors' just print versions, and screenshots of policy documents or clips from press conferences really created that emotional or authoritative impression for viewers. And I think in this way, tone, wording, and imagery all really work together nicely to assist shaping that public interpretation. And this is where our evidence and trends come up. And I think the evidence really showed that real world impact. Teacher surveys reported a sense of being undermined, and students were concerned about losing important learning materials. Experts also argued that the focus on censorship overshadowed more pressing needs, such as funding and classroom resources. Again, the teacher strike. So I also drew a historical comparison to US book bans to kind of show that the Edmonton issue fits within a broader ideological trend across North America. And it was really funny because I looked at Margaret Atwood's humorous critiques and her little story she made about the topic. And I think they made the topic more relatable and highlighted those power and ethical concerns. And looking at all of this evidence helped me shape my own perspective on the issue. And I'm really excited to share with you guys my insight because, in my opinion, the book ban does risk restricting students' freedom to explore ideas and develop that critical thinking. I do think protecting children from a little bit too intense topics is important, but the policy could have achieved that goal without making the why so confusing with all that miscommunication involved. And that leads to my question of like, why now? Why are we banning books now after we've been exposed to them for so long in high schools and middle schools? Because I know for me personally, there was never any ban or exclusion on what we were allowed to read. And I think that really helped my generation come to terms with uncomfortable topics. So reviewing this topic also showed me how media and rhetoric can drastically shape public opinion. I found myself questioning if it was really that political overreach, and I realized that it was the word choice, emotional appeals, and imagery that was persuading my opinion and understanding of the issue ultimately, because I was questioning my own personal viewpoint when I was reading different authors' emotional views and takes on this issue. So, to wrap up, the key takeaways and implications today are just that the Edmonton book ban really shows how complex public issues become when they move through political, educational, and media channels. Each perspective I reviewed emphasized a different priority, whether that be protection, freedom, or just clarity, and the rhetoric surrounding the issue amplified those tensions. By analyzing how each viewpoint used language, evidence, and framing, we gain a clear understanding of why this debate escalated the way that it did and why it remains unresolved, well, because of external factors and internal factors like the teacher strike. And recognizing this complexity is essential for thoughtful policymaking and for navigating public conversations about things like this moving forward. These insights were all informed by a range of sources, which I have included here. And these are only a snippet of the sources that I use because I found a lot of really interesting ones. Again, they cover those opinion pieces, editorials, legislative documents, and news reports between March 2nd and October 17th, with a little bit of additional information to support a broader view of the issue from the United States. And that's where we come to this Q&A. So I thank you guys all for listening to this little presentation of mine, and please feel free to post your questions in the comments, and I am very excited to answer them.